Hello and welcome to this special edition of the podcast. Today we're joined on the show by James Bruegger, Chief Investment Officer and Managing Partner of Seraphim Space Investment Trust. James, you were one of the co-founders of Seraphim and you've been a long-term venture capital investor in SpaceTech. So what initially piqued your interest?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me. Delighted to be here today. What first piqued our interest was over a decade ago, we already saw some of the green shoots of profound change happening in the space sector. What am I referring to? The emergence of what's now known as new space, which is really a combination of low-cost reusable rockets like those from SpaceX. They just started flying and not yet bringing stuff back down or coming back down a decade ago, and also these really small, low-cost satellites, the sort of size of a shoebox, made out of the same componentry that goes in your mobile phone, of which there were a handful of people that had put up a handful of satellites. So why did that pique our interest? Because you put those two things together and it suddenly means that you can do stuff in orbit 100 times less expensive than has ever been possible before. And as venture capitalists, when you see opportunities for massive multi-hundred billion dollar global sectors going through not a 10x change, 100x change, that is exactly the sort of opportunity set that the venture capitalists look for. It helps that I'm a bit of a space nerd and have always had a love for sci-fi. So, you know, when your personal passions align with business opportunity, that's a really rare thing, and we had to seize it with both hands.
Absolutely. I mean, James, I'm full disclosure, I'm a shareholder and I'm emotionally invested in SpaceTech as well as actually invested in SpaceTech. But I do get the sense, you say it's, it is a multi-trillion opportunity. I get the sense we might be an inflection point now as well.
Yeah, that's certainly our thinking, Ian. And I guess one way that we think about the opportunity of space is actually being broadly analogous in terms of scale and impact and inflection point to that of artificial intelligence, which I'm sure your audience has some awareness of all the profound changes that are happening there. Why do we say that? Well, because space touches everything already. And if you overlay on that 100-fold change in getting to space, what does that mean? Put simply, a little bit like AI is going to impact every single part of the global economy. We see space having exactly that same sort of scale of potential. And what we've seen over the last 10 years that we've been focused on this market is theoretical starting to now translate into tangible evidence of the rubber really hitting the road with these businesses. And I think that's why we think the market is really at an inflection point. These concepts have now incontrovertibly been proven both technically and commercially, but there's still a relatively small number of things in orbit today. And there's going to be an awful lot more in the years ahead. And we think that's going to unlock massive opportunities.
James, that's brilliant. And what are the benefits to shareholders from the stewardship of manager Seraphim? And kind of what's your track record of picking winners?
So we've been at this 10 years, longer than anyone else in terms of fund managers focused on space. So we built a position of global market leadership and thought leadership that has translated into really positive results for our investors in different funds. Our first private fund was a top decile fund for its vintage globally. So we have shown you really can make money in space. We've got a very strong track record of now having backed through our funds about 45 businesses, 20% of which have gone on to become what's referred to as unicorns. So businesses that are valued in excess of $1 billion. Wow. Track record with our listed fund, Seraphim Space Investment Trust, has also started to really come through in the last year, with the portfolio now been worth double the cost of the investment that we've put into it.
Right, okay. And what sort of access do you have to deals? And maybe people might be a bit surprised that you don't own shares in SpaceX. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, so two separate things. So we operate globally and at all stages. What does that mean? It means that we're giving every single space business in the world a reason to come and talk to us, and many of them do. So we get pretty good access to opportunities worldwide. Why aren't we invested in SpaceX? It's not because we don't think it's a fantastic business. Very simply, different fund vehicles have different mandates and they have to align with opportunities. So our early stage funds weren't aligned with where SpaceX was at that time, already a multi-billion-dollar company. And again, with our listed fund, which raised which IPO'd in 2021, the mandate from our investors was to take a hands-on activist role in the businesses, joining the boards and having meaningful stakes. We couldn't do that in the context of SpaceX, which unfortunately at that point was already worth somewhere between $200 and $300 billion. So it's just a mismatch with the mandates we've had and where SpaceX has been on its phenomenal journey.
Right. And one of your holdings is Hawkeye 360, which I noted has filed a registration for an IPO. Are there any other investments ready to launch in terms of going public?
Yeah, so I think, look, our general view here is that our most successful businesses will become natural candidates for going public. There is a long, well-established heritage over multiple decades of space companies looking to go public. We've already had 5 companies in our portfolio go public to date. Hawkeye will be the 6th next month, which we're very excited about. I think it's reasonable to assume that if you look at our most important holdings, most, not all, but most would hope to be on a trajectory to go public. Key one to call out there is clearly our biggest holding, ICEYE, where the management team has gone on record as saying they do expect ICEYE to become a public company in due course.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and that's when we talked to Mark about ICEYE, it was it was a standout, as I say, when we talked about that. Again, as a shareholder, I'm interested because you're obviously finding more opportunities because you're raising money at the moment. I think £350 million, and you're doing it via C share issue. Now, maybe listeners won't be familiar with C shares. What are they, and how will this work?
Sure. So firstly, why are we raising money now? And we're looking to raise up to 350 million in one or more fundraise because of this confluence of opportunities that we've talked about. The sector is at an inflection point. There are lots and lots of opportunities out there, lots of other potential ICEYEs that we think it's in our interest of our shareholders to get exposure to. What is a C share and why are we using it? So in simple terms, it's a separate class of temporary shares that you invest into that trade independently of the ordinary shares, that invest in a separate pool of assets, and then ultimately those two classes of shares come together and the pools of assets are merged. So it's a relatively well-established mechanism for investment trusts to look to raise additional money. Why are we doing that? Because from our existing shareholder perspective, if we were to invest straight into the ordinary pool of shares, we're effectively diluting the performance. So the NAV per share, which, as I said, our portfolio is 2 times a cost, would be dragged down by potentially adding a load of money. Whereas if you're doing it on a NAV to NAV merger, once the C shares have deployed, you're getting more of a balance in terms of diversifying exposure for your existing investors, whilst not negatively affecting NAV per share, and through that, the value of their shareholdings in the company.
Oh, thank you for explaining that. I was confused, as I'm a shareholder, so.
Yeah, that's really useful. Can we talk about AI and data centers, James? So as we've seen this week, US tech companies, they're throwing hundreds of billions of dollars at AI infrastructure. When Ian and I had a chat with Mark Boggett a while back, he was talking about the potential to operate data centers in space. Do you agree, and how would this work?
I definitely agree in that I'm highly confident that if we look out over an indeterminate period of time, that a significant proportion of the compute infrastructure that will be powering AI in the future will be in orbit, and I'll come on to why that is in a moment. Realistically, though, I think it is going to be a few years before you see sort of terrestrial scale data centers flying in orbit. But already you're seeing people putting up individual sort of NVIDIA chips into orbit to do on orbit compute. So this is already happening.
It's happening.
It's just happening at relatively small scale. That will change over time, but it will take, I would have thought, probably the rest of this decade before we see really big things in orbit. Why would you put data centers in orbit? Well, a whole bunch of different reasons. Number one, real estate. Space is infinitely large, and therefore you're not having to pay for all of the real estate for building a data center. Two, space is very cold. So in terms of data centers, cooling is one of the major operational costs for data centers. Not saying you don't have to worry about that at all in space, but you've got the vacuum of space in which to deal with that. And three, power. You've got an infinite supply of solar power in space, and if you can harness all of those things, in theory, you're able to deploy massive amounts of compute capability in orbit that over time could actually become cheaper than doing stuff here on Earth.
Yeah, fascinating, isn't it, James?
Absolutely, yeah. No, James, thank you very much for your time. It's been absolutely fascinating hearing about the SpaceTech opportunity, and thanks to our audience as well. And if you enjoyed the show, please click like and make sure you're following us on social media.
And if you'd like to know more about Seraphim, head to the company's website. The address is investors.seraphim.vc. We'll have more special editions of the podcast next week, so make sure you tune in. Bye for now.